The wedding guests froze in stunned silence as an exhausted woman in faded clothes stumbled into the grand reception hall carrying nothing but a worn leather envelope and years of heartbreak in her eyes. Before anyone could stop her, she looked directly at the billionaire groom standing beside his beautiful bride and whispered words that shattered the perfect celebration into pieces. The man who had spent his entire life building an empire had just publicly denied the only family he had left, and within minutes, a hidden truth buried for more than 2 decades would leave every guest fighting back tears. Before we continue this unforgettable journey, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing stories that remind us how love can heal even the deepest wounds. Every flower in the elegant garden shimmered beneath the bright afternoon sun, and every smiling guest believed they were witnessing the wedding of the year. The reception was held in the spacious glass pavilion overlooking rolling green hills, where musicians played gentle melodies and laughter drifted through the warm daylight. The groom, Alastair Rowan, was known across the country as one of the youngest self-made billionaires in modern history. Newspapers admired his brilliance, television interviews praised his discipline, and business magazines called him untouchable. Very few people knew that beneath the polished image was a lonely man who had spent years running from the pain of his childhood. His bride, Meredith Sinclair, loved him not because of his fortune but because she believed every broken person deserved someone willing to stay. She had often sensed the sadness hidden behind his confident smile, but Alastair always changed the subject whenever conversations drifted toward his family. When the woman appeared at the entrance, several security guards rushed toward her, convinced she had wandered into the wrong event. Her clothes were clean but old, her shoes were worn thin from years of walking, and her trembling hands clutched the envelope as though it contained her entire life. She introduced herself quietly as Clara Rowan. The surname immediately caught the attention of a few guests close enough to hear, but Alastair's expression hardened before anyone else could react. Without giving her a chance to explain, he declared that he had no sister and ordered security to escort her away before she ruined the celebration. The words echoed through the reception with shocking cruelty. Clara lowered her head as tears slipped down her cheeks, yet instead of leaving, she slowly lifted the envelope and asked only for 1 minute before she disappeared forever. Meredith gently touched Alastair's arm, silently encouraging compassion, but years of buried resentment clouded his judgment. He remembered only fragments of childhood pain, believing his younger sister had been taken away while their mother abandoned him to survive alone. Those memories had fueled every sleepless night, every impossible ambition, and every ruthless business decision. In his mind, family had been another word for betrayal. He had convinced himself that cutting every emotional tie was the only reason he survived. Clara stood alone before hundreds of strangers while whispers spread through the crowd. She carefully opened the envelope and removed several faded photographs. One showed 2 smiling children building a sandcastle under bright summer skies. Another captured a tired mother holding both children close outside a modest apartment. The final photograph was torn directly down the middle. Clara held the broken picture toward Alastair, revealing the missing half that perfectly matched a photograph he had secretly carried in his wallet for years. His breathing slowed. His confidence disappeared. The reception grew silent enough for everyone to hear birds singing beyond the open garden. Clara explained that she had searched for him almost her entire adult life. After their father died, crushing debts forced social services to separate the children. Their mother became desperately ill and begged relatives for help, but no one stepped forward. Alastair had been adopted by a wealthy family after displaying remarkable intelligence, while Clara entered a series of foster homes that never became permanent. Their mother spent her final years writing letters that were never delivered because every address she received for Alastair proved outdated. Before she passed away during a bright autumn afternoon many years earlier, she placed every photograph and every letter inside the leather envelope and made Clara promise never to stop searching. The guests listened with tears quietly forming in their eyes. Clara admitted she had finally located Alastair only months earlier but could never gather the courage to approach him. Every news article painted him as powerful, unreachable, and surrounded by luxury. She feared he would reject someone whose life reflected poverty rather than success. When she learned about the wedding through public announcements, she realized this might be the only opportunity she would ever have. She did not come asking for money. She did not want his mansion, his businesses, or his fame. She simply wanted her brother to know that he had never been abandoned. Alistair remained frozen. The carefully constructed walls around his heart began to crack. Meredith gently picked up one of the letters that had slipped onto the floor. She asked permission to read it quietly to herself before handing it to Alistair. His hands shook so violently that he struggled to unfold the fragile paper. Every sentence carried the unmistakable voice of a loving mother who apologized repeatedly for circumstances beyond her control. She wrote about praying every single afternoon that both her children would someday find each other again. She begged them never to blame one another for choices made by desperate adults. She believed forgiveness would become the greatest inheritance she could leave behind. The billionaire who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without emotion suddenly broke down before everyone. Years of grief poured from him like a flood that could no longer be contained. He realized the story he had believed throughout his life had been built upon painful misunderstandings instead of truth. Slowly, he walked toward Clara. She instinctively stepped backward, expecting another rejection. Instead, Alistair collapsed to his knees on the polished floor, overwhelmed by regret so deep he could barely breathe. Tears streamed across his face as he held the torn photograph against his chest. The guests who had admired his strength moments earlier now witnessed a far greater kind of courage. Pride disappeared. Wealth became meaningless. Only family remained. Clara hesitated before kneeling beside him. After years of loneliness, fear, disappointment, and unanswered questions, brother and sister embraced beneath the warm afternoon sunlight pouring through the glass pavilion. Many guests openly cried. Even photographers lowered their cameras for several moments because the emotion unfolding before them felt too sacred to interrupt. Meredith quietly thanked Clara for refusing to give up. She admitted that throughout their relationship she had always sensed someone important was missing from Alistair's life. Clara smiled through tears and confessed she had imagined this reunion thousands of times, but none of those dreams had prepared her for the overwhelming relief of finally knowing her brother's heart had not been permanently closed. The celebration changed completely after that moment. Instead of returning immediately to speeches and music, Alistair invited Clara to sit beside him at the head table. He introduced her proudly as his sister before every guest. The applause lasted several minutes, not because people admired another wealthy family member but because they had witnessed forgiveness overcoming decades of misunderstanding. As the afternoon continued, Clara shared stories from her difficult life without bitterness. She described working multiple jobs, helping elderly neighbors without expecting anything in return, and volunteering at shelters because she knew exactly what loneliness felt like. Despite every hardship, she refused to let suffering define her character. Her resilience humbled everyone listening, especially Alistair, who realized true wealth had always belonged to the sister he never knew. Deeply moved, Alistair quietly left the reception for only a few minutes before returning with another envelope. Inside were legal documents establishing a charitable foundation in their mother's memory. Rather than simply giving Clara money, he proposed building community centers, educational scholarships, and emergency family assistance programs designed to keep struggling families together so fewer children would experience the separation they had endured. The foundation would be led jointly by Clara and Meredith, whose compassion had made reconciliation possible. The announcement received another standing ovation. Yet the greatest gift came moments later. One elderly woman attending the wedding approached Clara with trembling hands. She had once worked at the children's home where Clara briefly lived decades earlier. She remembered the little girl who spent every birthday wishing only for her brother's happiness. She had never forgotten that quiet child whose greatest dream was reunion instead of presents. Hearing those memories finally confirmed for Alistair that Clara's love had never faded, even while his own heart remained trapped behind resentment. As dessert was served beneath the bright afternoon sky, laughter returned to the reception, but it carried a different meaning now. Guests no longer celebrated only a marriage between two loving people. They celebrated a family restored after years of unimaginable loss. Children played across the gardens while older relatives shared stories of forgiveness, reminding one another that misunderstandings often grow larger than truth when silence lasts too long. Before the final toast, Alistair stood once more before everyone. He admitted that becoming wealthy had been easier than becoming emotionally honest. He had spent years believing success could replace family, but no amount of money could heal wounds that only love was capable of reaching. Looking at Clara beside Meredith, he realized the greatest victory of his life had nothing to do with business, awards, or fortune. It was finding the courage to admit he had been wrong and embracing the sister who never stopped believing in him. Before we reach the end of this emotional journey, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe forgiveness can rebuild relationships even after years of pain, or share a moment when kindness changed someone's life forever. The afternoon sun slowly painted the gardens with golden light as the celebration continued, with joyful smiles replacing painful tears. The broken photograph that had once symbolized separation was carefully placed inside a new frame with both halves reunited forever. It rested beside the wedding flowers as a reminder that families are not defined by perfect beginnings but by the courage to find one another again. Clara no longer felt invisible. Alistair no longer carried the burden of false memories. Meredith gained not only a husband but also the sister she never expected to welcome into her life. Together they proved that forgiveness does not erase the past, but it transforms the future into something far more beautiful than anyone believed possible. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May this story remind us all that kindness, truth, and forgiveness can reunite hearts that even time seemed unable to heal, and that sometimes the greatest treasure we spend our lives searching for is not wealth at all, but the family waiting to be embraced.